What's shaking, knife nerds? Today we are taking a look at the CKF T15, which is this lovely beast right here from Custom Knife Factory. And this is a pretty new release from Custom Knife Factory. In fact, these are still in stock in some places at the time of filming this video. So if I can get this uploaded by tomorrow, you can actually still go purchase one of these if it really tickles your pickle. Knife Center currently has them in stock, and I purchased this one from Brandon Jordan over at NC Blade, which is a fantastic small knife dealer to work with. Good dude, and he also offers Sezzle on his store there, so you can break this up into 4 payments because it is a pretty expensive knife at $450. So if that's something you want to do after the video, if you decide you are totally interested in this thing and you want to go scoop one up, check NC Blade first and see if Brandon still has any in stock. If not, you can pick it up at Knife Center currently. They do have some, and there may be other websites. Those are just the 2 that I know of. However, they are a limited batch knife, of course, as most CKFs are, and so they're not going to be around for very long. So make your move fast if you're going to make it. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck purchasing it on the secondary market from somebody that decided they didn't want it, and it's probably going to be a little over retail if you do it that way. That being said, quick specs, and then we are actually going to disassemble this knife, and we'll get right into that. The blade length here is 3 3/4 of an inch, 3.75, and the overall length is 8.66 inches, and it carries a weight of 4.16 ounces, pretty lightweight for the size of it. And the blade steel is Böhler M398. Not sure if you can see that. There it is. And so this is a new iteration of M390 that's just kind of breaking into the market here recently. And I've only seen 2 knife manufacturers so far use this steel. Shirogorov has used it in some of their custom division knives, and CKF has used it on this T15 here. And so, I'm sure others have used it, but those are the 2 that I'm aware of that have used this steel so far. And supposedly it's very similar to M390. It's in the same family, but with much greater edge retention. So that's pretty cool. M390 is a fantastic all-around steel, and to add more edge retention to that sounds pretty interesting to me. Although I just got this, so of course I haven't used it, haven't sharpened it, so I can't really speak with any experience on the steel itself, but I'm very curious to see how this stuff works in the real world. And so that's pretty cool. New steel hitting the market. New Böhler steel hitting the market is always a good thing. Now, that being said, let's just take a second here to appreciate this beauty. You've got this gorgeous, rough, kind of apocalyptic black washed finish on the handle scales, and this blue titanium anodized pivot collar. And then you've got a 2-tone finish on the blade here with the hand-rubbed satin flat portion and the stone-washed DLC blackwash style finish. And just this sick alien style clip here with a one-sided lanyard attachment point here on the back side of the knife, hidden from the show side. You do not see that here. And that's pretty cool. That's kind of a Shirogorov-ish type thing. And yeah, so this milling style that has been done here on this knife, it was designed by Alexei Konygin of Russia, who is a phenomenal knife designer that has worked with CKF in the past on the entire T series. He is the designer of the entire T series of CKF knives. And I have personally owned a T90, a T92, and the Ratata. I have not owned the T14 yet, which is the bigger brother to this knife. I know you're saying 3.75-inch blade. There's a bigger one? Yes, there is a bigger one of these. It's exactly like this, but just scaled up even more. Just a big, big knife. And that's how they did the T90 series as well. They first had the T92, which was the big dog, and then they had the T90, which was the smaller one that's similar to this. And I had both of those knives along with the Ratata back in 2018. I had all three of them at the same time, and they were just some of the most perfect CKF knives that I've ever laid hands on. I mean, from, just the absolute perfect execution with no quality control issues at all. Just most flawless guillotine action that I've ever had on a CKF knife. It was all those T series were just freaking amazing. And unfortunately, I ended up having to sell all three of those, and I really did not want to sell them. I wanted to keep those in my collection, and unfortunately, it was the kind of thing where I'm self-employed, business slowed down real bad for a little short period there, and bills were coming up, and I needed to pay bills, and those knives were safe queens. They were sitting there, unused as total collector pieces, and so they got sacrificed to pay some bills, unfortunately. And I really, really hated to see them go. But I am happy to have here in 2021 acquired a brand new CKF T15, because this is in that same family of knives, and it's very, very, very similar to the T90s. Although with some key differences I'll probably get into in a little bit here. So that being said, I am going to go ahead and break this down, because the pivot screw does not seem to be Loctited, or maybe it was Loctited, but it's not. It's backing out on me as I'm fidgeting with the knife, because this is an extremely fidgety action. I mean, just snappy as could be, and an absolute guillotine right out of the box. It didn't, I actually, all I did to it so far was I just put a drop of 85 weight nano oil onto the detent ball just to make that smooth. And my God, this action is fast and smooth, and just it's every bit of as good as the T90s that I have previously had. So let's see here. I'm only going to need one tool today to take this apart, which is just a flathead screwdriver, and I put some painter's tape over the tip just to keep from marring up these beautiful Shirogorov-ish screws that hold the knife together. There are only two screws that hold the knife together, one pivot screw, one body screw, and then of course there is an internal screw that holds the pocket clip on. So we have the hidden hardware thing going on here, and then one Torx, looks like a T8 from here, screw to hold the lock bar insert in, and that's all of the hardware. And so let me go ahead and get after this, because I'm pretty interested to see the bearing race on this knife is a tad bit different than the T series was. I saw a disassembly of this knife already from Lefty EDC over on his channel, and this is spinning, so I'm going to have to put some pressure back here to hold on to the back side of the pivot there. And just get that loose. And he took it apart. He tried to swap aftermarket bearings into it, and it didn't work out for him, because the bearing race in this knife, it actually has a milled bearing race milled into the steel of the blade. And that's a pretty unusual thing. That's not a common thing. It was not present on the old T series knives at all. And not that I can remember. It's been 3 years since I had those. I don't think it was there. I think it was just riding on flat blades and flat washers, I'm pretty sure. So we've got our 2 screws out, simple as that. And I'm just gonna lift up on that. And we're gonna check out the inside. We can check out the show side scale here. Ooh, that's really, the standoff here. This blue titanium standoff is really pressure fitted into that scale. So I'm gonna leave that there. I mean, it's really in there. I'd have to get something to pry on that to get that out, and I'm not gonna do that because, you know, no need to remove that anyway. And we do have some, you know, hardened steel race washers here, which are very beautifully fitted into the scale there. It's a flush fit. And yeah, that's pretty gorgeous. I love the way that they did that. And so we've got that out of the way. We're going to pull this bad boy out and check that out. So you can see here, you can see the steel inside the inner diameter of the bearing race there. So these are actually inlaid into the blade, these bearings. And there is a bearing race in there. You know, you can see that little coved wall of the bearing race there. And that's very unusual. It would lead to a very consistent bearing pathway. And I really, really like that. But it is definitely designed to only fit, you know, factory size. These look like 1/4 inch, factory size 1/4 inch bearings. So you're not going to be able to swap skiffs or Gillians or anything into these because it is specifically made to work with only these bearings. So there's that out of the way. I really wanted to see that. It's pretty awesome. And yeah, very, very impressed with that. As far as the lock side, you know, pretty darn simplistic. We've got two internal screws here that hold the pocket clip. Beautiful milling pockets. You know, even with these large cutouts, they still performed milling pockets. Even here on the lock bar, they weight relieved all of that. And so, yeah, awesome. And the other inlaid race washer there. And one thing CKF usually does is they put the detent ball directly into the titanium, and it is not drilled through. So if this, you know, if you ever lose a ball here, or if you somehow crack that ceramic detent ball, you'd probably have some trouble with that, since it's not drilled through the backside and it's not part of the lock bar insert. Yeah, that ball is those are tricky. If you ever have a problem with that ball, that's a tricky thing to fix. But it's pretty much most CKFs are like that. Sometimes they'll do the detent ball in the lock bar insert, but typically it's like this. And so yeah, we're just gonna do a quick cleanup here. I'm gonna quit rambling and get on with this. And where is I'm just gonna use some rubbing alcohol here to clean up the pivot area, because I want this thing to have its best level of performance. I almost always disassemble a knife from the factory direct. If it's a knife that I really like and I might keep it for a little while or keep it permanently, I'm going to disassemble it. I want to know what the inner workings are like. I want to make sure that everything is up to my standards inside the knife as far as tolerances, fitments, and you know, everything is placed how it should be and working how it should. And so I will always take that apart and clean it and get all of the factory gunk because you are going to have some manufacturing debris, you know, that works its way into the pivot typically. Now, some companies do a better job of others than cleaning up their pivot before they assemble it, but a lot of companies don't. They just straight up slop the knife together, and you have all kinds of nasty stuff in that race before it ever, you know, hits the store shelves or the, you know, gets sent out to you in the mail. And so you're not going to get your best possible action out of that knife until you disassemble it and clean everything really well and make sure that, you know, none of that junk is in there. And so you know, this is a knife that I plan to hang on to for at least a little while, because man, I really dig it so far. I just barely got this yesterday, and so I have a feeling it's going to grow on me even more. And so she's probably going to be a keeper. And so I'm just making sure I'm getting this alcohol all the way down in here into the bearing race that's milled into this blade, and getting all that. Look at all that dirt that came out of there. Okay, that's a lot of goop that just got cleaned out, and that's going to make a difference in the action. Remember how smooth it was and how it was dropping shut, just buttery smooth out of the box? And that's with a dirty pivot. And I think the pivot was lightly lubed, it seemed like, but it was not lubed with grease. CKF used to use a grease, and it doesn't. I think they're not doing that anymore. In fact, I seem to recall Mike telling me that they actually switched to nano oil, and so they're using my preferred brand of knife lube at the factory over at CKF now, and that's pretty sweet. I'm making sure I'm getting the lock face, because I don't want any oil on that lock face at all. Get that all nice and clean. All right, now we are ready to reassemble this bad boy, and I'm going to Loctite the pivot. We're going to play with the action a little bit, and then I'm going to Loctite the pivot, because that was, like I said, that was backing out and getting loose on me when I was fidgeting with the knife over the past 24 hours. I almost forgot to clean the pivot here, so let me do that real quick first. Make sure you get all that stuff. And another thing that's real prudent here, since I am going to be Loctiting, I'm actually going to take the female barrel side of the pivot. I'm going to dump some alcohol into that female side and then drain it out. If I had a Q-tip, I'm out of Q-tips right now, but if I had a Q-tip, I'd strip some of the cotton off of it and run it down in there and clean out those threads really well with alcohol, but I'm out of Q-tips right now, so we're just going to do a dump and rinse method here for a second. Off the camera. You don't need to see me do that. You know what I'm talking about, right? Right. Blow the alcohol down in there and then drain it. And that should be a pretty clean female side. And then we're going to take the male and get the oil off the threads there. This is pretty important. If you're going to do Loctite, you need to get those threads, both sides, really well cleaned up. Usually there's no reason to Loctite the body screw. I'm just going to clean the threads regardless on that body screw there for the heck of it. Okay, so on the reassembly, this is not a captive pivot, it's just a free spinning pivot all around, see? So no need to, you know, worry about getting that into a specific position or anything. Oh yeah, clean the bearings too. That would help. we're slacking off here today. I'm going to go ahead and grab each of these bearings and rinse them off with the alcohol real thoroughly. I'm glad to see they used 1/4 inch size bearings in this knife. When you spread that ball footprint out a little further, it not only gives you room to add an extra ball to the race, so you get a little bit more more rigidity in the pivot, but it spreads that footprint out, and the wider the footprint is, the more stable the pivot becomes. And so 1/4 inch is a really good choice of bearing size. All the manufacturers, a lot of manufacturers are typically using either 3/16 inch bearings for USA made knives or 5mm bearings for China made knives, and that's a smaller size than the 1/4 inch, so you get less balls and less stability. But that's kind of become the industry standard today. So it's nice to see 1/4 inch for a change. Definitely dig that. Would be even nicer if they were multi-row, but you can't have everything great, can you? So I am going to lube these bearings because, man, I just want to know how buttery slick this thing's going to be with those milled race bearing races in the blade there, and some good lube and stuff. And I typically, when you run a set of bearings without oil, a lot of people like that for whatever reason. They run it without oil because it does attract less dirt. That's one positive. But one con of that is the sound that the bearings make. They sound kind of, I don't know, they sound like, metal on metal, or they just don't sound good anymore. And you can actually hear the bearings rattle in the cage because there's no, and this is a 10 weight I'm going to put in the bearings here, there's no oil keeping the bearings from rattling around in the cage. So I'm probably way over lubing this, but I'm expecting to get some of this up into the bearing race here so that it's gonna work its way into the race side of the pivot here. So I'm just gonna spin that around a little bit. It is interesting that they used a 3/16 inch pivot here with these 1/4 inch bearings, but that's okay in this case because the stability of the bearing is not held into place by the pivot barrel like it is on most knives. On this knife, it's held into place by the milled race that they milled into the blade, which is pretty freaking awesome if you ask me. Now we're gonna do just a little bit inside each side of the blade there. Whoops, don't like that. Get that off of there. Just to make sure I got plenty of oil in there. I want this thing buttery slick. This is way more oil than I would typically use. We're not worried about it today. Now, the way that I apply oil to the detent ball, it varies from knife to knife. Sometimes I'll put a dot on the detent ball itself, and and then just work that oil onto the blade from the detent ball. But I've found that I usually get a little bit more runoff and it gets onto the lock face easier that way. So the way that I've been doing it lately is I'll just take my little drop of 85 weight nano oil, and I just want to get just a really fine drop, just barely hanging out of the tip there, and kind of just dab a few little points onto the track. Okay, just very tiny amounts onto the track. That's going to spread out a little bit, goes a really long ways with this 85 weight nano oil. And oh, one other thing I typically like to do is just put a dab of the 10 weight onto the pivot itself so that there's some lubrication between the pivot and the blade, and just get a little bit on there. I went a little crazy with the oil on this one, not gonna lie, but that's okay. I know how slick this thing is gonna be once it's done. Most of the time, if I get runoff, it's not really from the bearings, it's from the oil that I put onto the detent. And so this method of the way that I'm applying this oil to the detent here gives me the least runoff, and I really like that. And I am putting the the cupped side of these standard generic race bearings facing into the blade so that it repels grit from getting in there in between the blade and the bearing, hopefully, ideally. And she's going back together just like that. Man, that is just beautiful, simple construction. I mean, I had no fight with that at all. 2 screws for the whole knife. I absolutely love simplistic construction. It's a wonderful thing. So I'll probably start these with my fingers here. Just get them snugged up. Those are pretty darn easy to turn in with your finger. I dig that. I always liked the hardware when I had my T-Series previously. No real problems with it. It's easy to work with. It's not like, although it's similar looking to Shirogorov hardware, it doesn't work like Shirogorov hardware. This is better in every single way, because the Shirogorov hardware is very much proprietary. The milling that they put into the screws is it's machined in a way that requires their specific tool to correctly remove the pivot without marring the pivot. And it's just the Shirogorov thing to do that. They want you to buy their $300 pivot tools. I've probably got the pivot a hair tight right now, but I'm just going to work some of this oil in. My God, that is smooth. Oh, man, it feels even better. It's so much better now than it was out of the box. It's way smoother. I can totally feel that all of that grit is gone, and it's just like, God, it's every bit as smooth as a Shirogorov would be. And this Alexei Konygin design language is sort of Shirogorov-ish in a way. Just similar kind of design features. I wouldn't say he's a ripoff of Shiro, but I would say that they have very similar artistic visions of knives between those two guys. And so we're gonna check. Absolutely no blade play there. In fact, I probably have it a little too tight, and so we're gonna back it off just a hair. Yeah, okay, now it's really, actually now I got play, so I took it out just a little too far. Okay, no play. And God, that's an unbelievable action, guys. Unreal. It's a finger chopper. I'm gonna lose my thumb here fidgeting with this thing. We're headed into 30 minutes here, and before I hit the road running here for you guys, I wanted to show you just the spare hardware that does come with this particular knife. And I don't need to show you the entire pouch contents that come with a CKF. I just showed you that in my previous review of the CKF MCAD Meta. So I'm just going to show you the hardware that comes with this because there is some extra stuff in here. Okay, so what we got, they give you a bronze titanium pivot collar there that you can replace that blue titanium pivot collar with if you prefer to see a pop of bronze there on the front instead of blue. They give you a spare blue titanium standoff. They give you a spare blue titanium pocket clip. I am probably just going to leave that and stick with the black wash pocket clip because I think it looks insanely cool. I really like the black wash look of that sort of apocalyptic thing that really goes with this particular theme on this knife, which is very reminiscent of like the alien ships on Independence Day. That's what I think of when I see this style of these Konijin knives, man. It's freaking Independence Day alien ships is what that is to me. And so and then in addition to those body parts, you get an entire 2 more pivot and body screws there. You get more brand new race washers. You get a new set of bearings, a new lock bar insert, and a new stop pin, and the screws for the pocket clip. This is a complete hardware kit. Everything on this knife that isn't the scales or the blade is, they give you spares of it and you can replace it if it gets damaged down the road. So that's phenomenal. When they include the entire hardware kit, everything is there. You don't have much to worry about. You know, if you strip a screw, mess it up, if your pocket clip gets too scratched up from carrying this knife every day for 3 years, you've got replacements for all of that. So it's freaking awesome. That being said, I wanted to roll in some clips of my T90 series that I had back in 2018. So I will roll those in and just show you, how my T series knife collection has evolved since then. And I wish I had gotten to hang on to those guys, and if I get lucky, maybe I'll see one out there on the aftermarket again one day and pick up another T90 or T92 and get back into them. They have made some refinements on this T15, T14 series, and like they added new chamfers here to the ends of the knife, and it's a little bit different because these are full cutouts, and of course the two-tone blade is different. Just some refinements, but that bearing race is the most major change to me that I noticed. That's a big deal. God, it really feels like my T90 series did, but maybe with a tighter, cleaner pivot now. I mean, that bearing race is an epic thing. It really is. I would like to see more manufacturers do that and execute that in a way that's as good as this is, because this is really, really good. I mean, God, look at that. Just perfect, flawless action. The detent is light. It's easy. It's not, this detent is not hard at all, but you can't fail it at all. It's like, I don't even know how they nail the detent so perfectly like this, because I can't fail it. I mean, maybe I could if I really, really tried. No, it's pretty close. I can't fail it, even if just putting a slight bit of pressure. It's so easy to deploy, so snappy, so drop shutty. God, what an action. What an action. All right, guys, this has been a long one. Hope you enjoyed it, and stick around for more reviews. Later.